I stood at the grand entrance, my fingers gripping the cold door handle, a smirk playing at the corner of my lips. Inside, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the sound of soft music drifted out like a mockery of the moment. I was here, and I was not invited. As I stepped in, my heels clicked against the marble floor, the echoes reverberating across the enormous room. There they were, my parents, my mother radiant in her designer gown, my father with that same smug smile, both the picture of success and happiness. But when they saw me, all that charm vanished. "Sorry, you're not invited," my mother said, her voice just a touch too sweet, laced with something cold. My father gave me a quick glance, as if I were an inconvenient speck of dust. The room went silent, all eyes on me, but I wasn't here to beg for a seat at the table. Oh no, I had my own plans, years of being sidelined, humiliated, excluded from the family's celebrations, all for a reason I never understood. I had worked hard, built my life from scratch, only to watch as they threw every opportunity at my brother, their golden child. It was always him or his needs first, and I was just the background noise. But tonight, that was about to change. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the one who had to watch from the sidelines. Tonight, I was here to make them pay for every tear, every rejection, every time they made me feel small. In the next 5 minutes, everything they had worked so hard to build, everything they had so carefully crafted, would come crumbling down. And it was going to be spectacular. I smiled, the warmth in my chest, not for them, but for what I was about to do. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories. The doors slammed behind me, echoing through the hallway, but I didn't look back. Inside, I could hear them talking, whispering, trying to make sense of the chaos I'd just unleashed. But their words meant nothing to me now. They were finally seeing me for who I truly was, the one they had overlooked, the one they thought they could control. But this wasn't just a moment of vengeance. It was years in the making, years of being pushed aside, of being told I was not good enough. The same eyes that now held fear once held nothing but indifference. I wasn't just here to make a scene. I was here to make them realize what they had done to me, the daughter they never really saw, the sibling they always overshadowed, the one who had learned to live in their shadows. Tonight, they would see me, they would feel the consequences of every word, every dismissal, every moment of neglect. As I made my way down the cold corridor, my mind raced back to the years I had spent in the background, waiting for my chance. The years when my success didn't matter, when my dreams were ignored, and when my worth was reduced to nothing but a side note in their perfect world. But now, as I stepped out into the cold night, I knew the game had changed. I had spent months preparing for this day. Every detail, every step, had been planned with precision. The world they had built was about to come crashing down, and there was no turning back now. I stood outside the grand ballroom, my fingers gripping the handle of the door with an intensity that almost hurt. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from within, like a cruel reminder of all the years I had spent being nothing more than an outsider in my own family. As the cool air brushed against my face, I could feel the weight of every moment that had led me to this point. The years of feeling invisible, the small betrayals, the snide remarks disguised as advice, the way they treated me like a shadow, but no more. Inside, they were celebrating my parents, their friends, and all the people they had surrounded themselves with over the years, all of them oblivious to the fact that the very person they had cast aside was standing outside, waiting for the perfect moment to change everything. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs as my mind flicked back to the beginning of it all. The first time I truly understood I would never be enough. It wasn't just one moment. It was a series of them. The time when my brother was praised for his natural talent, and I was dismissed as too quiet to ever make an impact. Or the time when they handed him the keys to a brand new car on his 16th birthday, while I was left with a second-hand bicycle that had a flat tire. Even though they tried to disguise their favoritism with occasional smiles and empty words, I could feel it, always. It was there, lingering like a poison in the air. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It built up slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, I just let it slide. I thought, maybe if I work harder, they'll see me. maybe if I push myself, they'll finally recognize my worth. But that moment when I realized that no matter how hard I tried, no matter how successful I became, I would never be there. Favorite, never their priority, that was when everything changed. And that was when the plan began to form. I took another step forward, into the belly of the beast. The room was stunning, golden chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, fine china set at each place, the chatter of guests mingling with the soft hum of classical music. My parents were seated at the head of the table, looking every bit the power couple they had always been, smiling and laughing with friends who adored them. But what they didn't know was that while they basked in the glow of their achievements, their empire was crumbling beneath them. I had spent the past few months setting the stage for this night. Every step had been calculated, every move deliberate. I had learned their secrets, found their weaknesses, and most importantly, I had discovered what they were hiding. The deals they made in the dark corners of the business world, the lies they told to cover up their mistakes, all of it had been carefully documented, ready to bring everything they had built to its knees. But the hardest part wasn't the planning, it was the waiting. Waiting for the right moment to strike, waiting for everything to fall into place. It took everything I had not to lash out sooner, not to reveal my hand. But I knew if I was patient, if I played the part of the dutiful daughter, I would get my chance. And tonight, that chance had arrived. As I walked through the room, I could feel their eyes on me. My mother's glance lingered for a second longer than usual, a frown tugging at the corners of her mouth. My father, ever the composed businessman, pretended not to notice. But I knew they both felt the tension building. They could sense that something was different. Though they couldn't yet put their finger on it, they wouldn't until it was too late. I made my way to the table, my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing my emotions. I was in control now. And this time, they weren't going to walk away unscathed. The moment I reached the head of the table, I turned to face my parents. Their expressions were unreadable. Though I could see the flicker of confusion in their eyes, I knew what they were thinking. Why was I here? Why had I come uninvited to their celebration? And that's when I delivered the first blow. "I'm here to remind you," I began, my voice calm but carrying enough weight to freeze the entire room, "of everything you've done to me, everything you've put me through." There was a collective gasp around the table, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother's lips parted. Her words stuck somewhere between surprise and anger. My father, on the other hand, barely reacted. He was the type to remain composed, no matter the situation. But inside, I knew it was a different story. His empire was under threat, and he knew it. "You didn't think I would ever do anything about it, did you?" I continued, looking them both in the eye. "You thought I was just going to sit quietly in the background, the child you could ignore forever. But you were wrong." I paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then I took out my phone, tapping a few keys as the room fell into an even more uncomfortable silence. I could feel my parents stiffening beside me. "Here's a little something you might find interesting," I said, pulling up a file that contained everything they had worked so hard to bury: documents, emails, and contracts that tied them to deals that would ruin them in an instant. I watched as my father's face turned pale, and my mother's smile faltered. The shock on their faces was almost enough to satisfy me. But I knew this was just the beginning. This was only the first step. They had no idea what was coming next. As they tried to recover from the shock, I could feel the thrill of control surging through me. This was what I had waited for. The first part of my revenge had been executed perfectly, but the hardest part was yet to come. I had planned this night for months, setting up the pieces, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, as they scrambled to process what was happening, I knew there was no going back. The game had started, and I had already won the first round. The shock on my parents' faces was almost worth the years of silence. I watched as their once imposing presence faltered, their perfect world cracked wide open. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. This was only the beginning, the part where they realized the depths of the betrayal they had been blind to, the part where they understood that their perfect little empire was teetering on the edge. The first few moments were full of chaos. My father's hand shook as he reached for his phone. his eyes scanning the emails and documents I'd sent to the people who could destroy them in an instant. I could almost feel his panic radiating through the air. My mother, usually composed, was losing her cool, her mask slipping as she stammered for something to say, anything to regain control of the situation. What is this?" my father asked, his voice trembling for the first time I could remember. I smiled, letting the silence stretch for just a moment longer. They still hadn't fully grasped the weight of what I had done, but they would soon enough. "It's the truth," I said simply, my voice low but sharp. "Everything you thought you could hide is out in the open now." For a moment, I thought, they might snap at me. My father, ever the patriarch, the man who had spent years training me to play the dutiful child, the invisible one, might lash out. But instead, he just stood there, his face pale and his lips pressed tightly together, trying to hold it together in front of the guests. My mother, on the other hand, looked like she might collapse. She made a desperate move to take control of the situation, standing up from her seat and clutching her glass of champagne, her fingers trembling. "This is ridiculous," she declared, trying to force her voice to sound authoritative. But there was no mistaking the fear creeping into her tone. I knew what they were thinking. How could this be happening? How could my own child do this to us? But the truth was, it wasn't me who had ruined everything, it was them. They had spent their entire lives building a facade, hiding their dirty secrets, and leaving me to deal with the aftermath. They thought they could control me, mold me into the obedient child they could conveniently ignore. They thought I would never fight back. They were wrong. As my mother stumbled to find the right words, I knew it was time for the next phase. The first part of the plan had gone exactly as I'd hoped. Now, it was time to turn the knife. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small envelope I had prepared earlier. I had carefully crafted this part, and I could see the exact moment it hit them. I handed the envelope to my father, watching him closely as he opened it, already knowing what he would find inside. His face went even paler as he scanned the contents. This is impossible," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone in the room. But it was already too late. The damage had been done. His once perfect reputation was about to crumble. In front of his very eyes, inside the envelope were pictures that exposed the dirty deals he had been making with shady business partners. It was all there, the handshakes in dark corners of exclusive clubs, the confidential contracts that should have been buried for good, the lies he had told to protect his image. I had watched him for years, studied him, learned everything I needed to know. Now, it was all spilling out, piece by piece. And just when I thought the tension couldn't get any worse, my phone buzzed with another notification. This time, it wasn't just the documents. It was a message from one of the business partners I had planted in my father's network. The message was short, but it was enough to send a wave of panic through my father. "Your empire is crumbling. I know what you've done." He didn't even look at me then. His focus was entirely on the phone, his hands shaking as he typed furiously. He was trying to control the situation, trying to send out damage control before it all came crashing down. But there was nothing he could do now. The walls had already closed in. I stood there, watching him squirm, feeling a strange satisfaction in the pit of my stomach. But I couldn't stop yet. Not until they understood what they had done to me. As my father started making frantic phone calls, my mother began to break down. She had always prided herself on being the perfect mother, the perfect wife. But now, as she clutched at her pearls and tried to compose herself, I could see the cracks forming. The reality of the situation was sinking in. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice a mixture of desperation and disbelief. "What do you think this will accomplish?" I took a step closer, the room feeling smaller with every second that passed. "I want you to finally understand what it feels like to be invisible," I said, my voice steady, "to be treated like nothing more than an afterthought. I want you to feel the humiliation, the shame, the betrayal, and then, just to push it further, I dropped the final bomb. I'm the one who has been keeping your secrets all these years. I'm the one who could have exposed you at any time, but I didn't, until now." I could see at the moment when they realized they had underestimated me, the moment when they understood that I wasn't just some quiet child waiting in the wings. I had been watching and waiting. Now, the tables had turned. As the evening continued, the tension in the room reached a boiling point. My parents were struggling to contain the fallout, trying to salvage what was left of their reputation. But I wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. With the first wave of their destruction already set in motion, I knew that there would be more. There was still much more to unravel, much more to take from them. They had thought I would stay silent. They had thought I would never fight back. But now, they would see just how wrong they were. The party went on around us, but it felt like the world had stopped. The guests, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface, continued to laugh and clink glasses. But for me, every second in that room felt like an eternity. My parents were still reeling, their efforts to salvage their image proving futile. I had struck hard, but there was so much more to do, so much more to tear apart. They thought the worst was over, but I knew it had only just begun. As I watched my father pace the room, his phone glued to his ear as he barked orders to his staff, I realized just how fragile everything he had built was. His empire, the reputation he had spent decades constructing, was crumbling in real time. I could see the panic in his eyes, something I had never witnessed before. My mother, who had always been the calm in the storm, was now a mess of nerves, desperately clutching her champagne flute like a lifeline. But I wasn't just enjoying their panic. No, the deeper satisfaction came from knowing that the people who had never cared for me, who had treated me like a pawn in their perfect little game, were now helpless. And I wasn't going to stop until they felt the full weight of their actions. The feeling of control, the thrill of knowing that they were powerless in this moment, was intoxicating. I took a slow step back, moving toward the edge of the room, keeping a careful distance from my parents. I had learned years ago how to stay out of sight when I needed to, how to observe without being noticed. Now, I was invisible again, but for an entirely different reason. I was the puppeteer, pulling the strings, watching as the chaos unfolded. Around me, they were stumbling, unsure of how to manage the disaster I had set in motion. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from one of the business partners I had planted in my father's inner circle. The message was short, but it was enough to send a wave of adrenaline through me. "The press is starting to catch wind. They're coming for you." My heart raced. I had anticipated this: the media, the public reaction, the scandal that would rock their world, but seeing it unfold so quickly sent a rush of power through me. The world they had so carefully curated, built on lies and manipulation, was about to collapse, piece by piece. This wasn't just about getting revenge on them for what they had done to me. This was about dismantling everything they had ever been proud of. I leaned against the wall, letting the reality sink in. Everything was happening just as I had planned. The media would descend like vultures, hungry for the blood of the wealthy elite. And my parents, who had spent their entire lives hiding behind wealth and power, would have nowhere to run. As I watched the panic on their faces, a new thought started to form in my mind. It wasn't just about their destruction anymore. No, this was about something deeper. It was about making them see me, truly see me, for the first time. The daughter they had ignored, the sibling they had pushed aside, the person they had forgotten. They had underestimated me for so long now. It was time for them to realize that their neglect had created a monster, and I was ready to bite back. I had already exposed their darkest secrets, but now I needed to make them feel the full weight of the truth. I needed them to understand that their actions, their treatment of me, would haunt them forever. They had thought they could push me down, make me feel small, but I was far from small. I watched as my father, his face pale, ran his hands through his hair in frustration. My mother, in a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, tried to smile at the guests, to continue playing the role of the perfect hostess. But the cracks in her facade were obvious. She was unraveling, and the entire room could see it. It was time for the final move. I walked over to the small podium at the front of the room, where my father usually made his speeches about success, about hard work, about how everything he had built was the result of his sheer determination. I knew exactly what to say to make the room fall into a stunned silence. I took the microphone, my voice calm but firm, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to this wonderful celebration of my parents' success. But I have Something far more important to share with you than the usual speeches. What you don't know about my parents, what they've kept hidden from all of you, is something you should hear. The room fell dead silent. Every eye was on me, even my parents froze, their gazes locked onto me in shock. The guests, many of whom I had never met, leaned forward in their chairs, eager to hear what I would say next. I continued, my voice steady as I revealed more of their corruption, more of their lies. For years, my family has been building their empire on the backs of others, using dishonest tactics and leaving a trail of broken people in their wake. My father, I paused for effect, has been hiding illegal business deals, taking advantage of those who trusted him. And my mother, I glanced at her, has been complicit in every step. I watched the realization dawn on their faces as the guests began whispering among themselves. The weight of my words landed like a bombshell, and there was no going back. Now, as I turned to face my parents, I could see the color draining from their faces. My mother's mask had completely slipped, and my father was no longer the confident, powerful man he had been earlier that evening. They were exposed, vulnerable. This, I said, looking around the room, is the price of betrayal. This is what happens when you forget who your family really is. I could feel the satisfaction building inside me. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And it wasn't over. There was more to come. Much more. The room was still. The weight of my words hung in the air like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. Every single person present had heard the truth. They had seen the powerful, untouchable figures of my parents, the people they had once revered, now exposed for what they truly were. I could feel the surge of power coursing through me. This was the moment I had been working toward for years. It wasn't just about ruining them. It was about finally being seen, about making them understand the damage they had caused, about giving them a taste of the humiliation and powerlessness they had forced me to live with. My father, ever the strategist, finally broke the silence. He tried to compose himself, his voice shaky but commanding. You don't know what you're doing. This isn't just about you. You'll destroy everything we've built, everything you've ever had. I turned to face him, my eyes meeting his with a calmness that belied the storm within me. I don't need you anymore, I said, my voice steady. I've never needed you, but you needed me. You needed me to stay quiet, to stay invisible. Well, not anymore. His face twisted with frustration, a rare emotion for a man who prided himself on control. He stepped toward me, his hand reaching out as though he could physically take back the power he had lost. You're making a huge mistake, he warned, his tone low, almost pleading. I shook my head, my gaze hard. No, the mistake was yours. You should have seen me. You should have treated me like a daughter. But you never did. And now, you'll learn what happens when you underestimate the person you've been stepping on. I didn't give him a chance to respond. Turning my back on him, I addressed the guests who were watching the drama unfold with wide eyes, some in shock, others in disbelief. Now, you all know the truth, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. What will you do with it? The room was filled with murmurs, some people clearly uncomfortable with the revelations, others whispering about how they could use this information to their advantage. It didn't matter to me. My parents' reputation, the empire they had so carefully built, was crumbling before their very eyes. They could try to control the narrative, but it was too late. The truth had been set loose, and nothing could undo what I had done. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. The media had arrived. I had made sure of that. It wasn't just about the destruction of their personal reputations anymore. It was about everything they had built being exposed to the world. Their business deals, their hidden corruption, the lies they had been living. No one would be able to ignore it now. I took a moment to survey the room, the people around me. Some had already begun to slip away, sensing the shift in power, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Others had pulled out their phones, preparing to document the fall of my parents' empire, knowing that a story like this would make headlines. But none of it mattered. It was already done. My mother was the first to break, her composure finally shattering. She clutched her chest as if the weight of what was happening was too much to bear. Her eyes were wild, searching the room for someone, anyone to help her. But there was no one left to save her. Not this time. I did this for you, she said, her voice trembling. breaking down completely as she turned toward me. "I tried to protect you. I did everything I could to make sure you had a future. But it was too late for apologies, too late for explanations. I had spent my entire life being told that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't matter. Now, I was the one in control. I had the power, and they had nothing left. Protection." I scoffed. "You protected me by keeping me in the shadows, by making me feel like I wasn't worth your time. You didn't protect me. You used me." Her face contorted with guilt and regret, but I didn't care. She could regret it all she wanted. The truth was out, and the consequences were hers to face. As the sirens grew louder and the flashing lights outside grew brighter, I knew the end was near. My parents, who had once stood tall as untouchable pillars of the community, were about to lose everything. Their wealth, their status, their reputation, all of it was slipping through their fingers like sand. And I was the one holding the shovel. The authorities arrived, their uniforms sharp against the glowing lights from the street. My father tried to compose himself, his voice trembling as he spoke with the officers, attempting to salvage whatever he could of the situation. But his words fell on deaf ears. They had their orders, and they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take him down. As my parents were escorted from the room, their faces a mixture of disbelief and anger, I felt a strange sense of release. This was what I had been waiting for, the final reckoning. They had thought they could destroy me, but in the end, it was they who were destroyed. I stepped into the cold night air, the chill biting at my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of my past, the years of neglect, the years of being invisible, had been lifted. The person I had once been, the child they had dismissed, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had taken back what was hers. And as the flashing lights faded into the distance, I couldn't help but smile. As I stood there, watching my parents being escorted out of the room in handcuffs, I felt a strange emptiness wash over me. The adrenaline that had propelled me through this journey, the satisfaction of watching them finally crumble, began to fade into something I hadn't expected: regret. I had spent years planning this moment, carefully building the perfect storm, and for what? To watch their downfall, to see them stripped of everything they had. The reality of what I had done began to sink in. I had sought revenge for so long, and now that I had it, I realized that no victory could ever truly undo the years of pain, the years of neglect, the years of feeling invisible. Yes, I had exposed their lies. Yes, I had shown them exactly what they had done to me. But in the end, it wasn't just them who suffered. I did to. In all my planning, in all my meticulous attention to detail, I had overlooked something fundamental: the cost of revenge. The price of destroying another person is never just their downfall. It's your own peace of mind, your own humanity. My parents' empire was in ruins, their reputation in tatters, their freedom taken from them. But what about me? What had I truly gained? I stood alone, a hollow shell of the person I had been before, with nothing but the wreckage of my family to keep me company. I had achieved what I thought would make me feel whole again, but instead, I felt emptier than ever. The lesson here, the bitter truth I had learned in the most painful of ways, was that vengeance may provide momentary satisfaction, but it comes at an incredible cost. It's a poison that seeps deep into your soul, clouding your judgment, and leaving you with nothing but ashes when the fire burns out. As I looked around the room, now empty save for a few lingering guests, I realized how much had been lost in the pursuit of my revenge, not just by my parents, but by me as well. The love I had once sought from them, the recognition I had longed for, was gone forever. The family I had once known was now nothing more than a distant memory. And so, as the authorities took my parents away and the last of the guests filed out, I stood alone. The taste of victory that had once seemed so sweet now left a bitter aftertaste. I couldn't shake. Revenge, I realized, doesn't heal the wounds, it only deepens them. It's a cycle of pain that never truly ends. And while I had gained the satisfaction of seeing my parents pay for what they had done, I knew that no amount of retribution could ever fill the void they had left inside me. In the end, what I had wanted, recognition, power, justice, had come at the price of my own peace. And as I watched the last of the flashing lights fade into the distance, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to undo the damage, if there was any way to rebuild what had been broken. But I knew that once the line was crossed, there was no going back. The lesson: the pursuit of vengeance is a dangerous path, one that can leave you hollow and broken long after the dust has settled. It's a reminder that while we may seek justice for the wrongs done to us, we must be careful what we wish for, because sometimes the consequences are far greater than we ever imagined. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.